welcome everybody. Welcome to this public webinar on the EUDR, the European Union's regulation on deforestation-free products, 1 year to implementation. We have a number of people registered to join this webinar, around 1,000 plus. So we're just going to wait for them to come in. They should be done quickly. We had quite a quick entry this morning, so we'll start about 3 minutes past the hour. And welcome to wherever you are from the world. Welcome, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're dialing in from around the world. Welcome to this webinar. As I mentioned a minute or so ago, we have around 1,000 people plus registered. We're expecting around 1,000 for this webinar. We had 1,300 this morning into this morning's session, so we're expecting around the same amount. So we're just waiting for a few seconds for a few minutes further to allow people to get in before we kick off this webinar in its totality. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're dialing in from in the world. Welcome to this webinar. We're just going to give it another minute or so. We had around 1,300 people this morning dial in. We're expecting around the same number, slightly short of that number. So we're just going to give it another minute before we kick off the formalities of this webinar. Thank you. So we're at 3 minutes past the hour, and I'll kick off. And we do expect more people to join. However, we will kick off for now. Thanks for your patience. Good afternoon from London. Welcome to this webinar, the EUDR 1 year to implementation, a public information webinar hosted by FSC. My name is Anand Punja. I'll be your moderator for today's session. And before we go into the formalities, I'll just start with a few logistics as well. So the first point I want to make is, before we get into the webinar, that there is simultaneous interpretation available in this webinar. Please select the interpretation tab and then choose at the bottom of the screen that you see in the Zoom. Hopefully many of you are now used to this, and choose either English, French or Spanish, which are the 3 official languages of FSC. So the webinar will be conducted in each of these languages. I'll give everyone a minute or so, a few seconds to choose the language. Okay, and then before we take off, if you hadn't worked out already when you joined, this webinar is being recorded. So just to let everybody know there as well. We intend to stop the recording after the presentations today, so we can go into the Q&A without the recording. With regards to the questions and answers, point 3 on this slide, we have had to change our normal way of Zoom meetings. Usually we use the Zoom meeting platform. We are now using the Zoom webinar platform because of the high numbers we had registered. So please do use the Q&A tab in the to ask questions. Before that detail, you can find, of course, information around EUDR and FSC, point 2 here on our website, fsc.org/EUDR. And then just a point 4 here is that we will have a kind of short feedback poll at the end of this webinar. We would appreciate if you could hang on for a few seconds longer just to give us a quick rating on how we did, so that we can look to seek to improve things as we move forward. So going back to point 3, the way to participate in this is through the Q&A buttons. What we would like, I've seen some people already do that already. We're trying to keep to our data protection policy as best as possible. So to help us with that, we would appreciate if you could, when you ask a questions, if you can kick in the box, there is in the questions box, there is a little tick box you can tick to say ask anonymously. Please can you tick that box so all questions are coming through to us anonymously. Some learning from this morning. We had a lot of specific questions this morning, very specific to people's business contexts and operating contexts. Those questions are going to be difficult for us to answer, and what they do is clog up the inbox for kind of the more generic questions that we can answer. So please be mindful of what questions you answer. If it's very, very specific to your business needs, then I would suggest that it's not the best place to ask that question here. You can still ask it. We probably will not answer it on this webinar, but we will maybe forward it to a business association. So if you are part of a business association, that is another place to go to, of course, as well. So you can do that. But one of the things you can do to help as well is upvote, like and upvote questions. So if there's a question you see that is relevant to your business, then please upvote it. That raises it in the priority, and that helps us just get to and prioritize our questions in the best way. You will see some chat boxes pop up. However, the chat function is disabled for this webinar for participants, just because we won't be able to manage that. So you will see chats and the chat box is being used only in this case for us to send relevant links for relevant FSC pages, as well as European Commission pages, where we can signpost you to further information as the presentation goes on. With that, I'd like to just introduce the agenda and the speakers. So we're currently in the welcome and introduction sessions conducted by me. Matteo will then move into a kind of a EUDR latest, the more generic, what's happening in the EUDR more generically and how we're engaging in that world. And Matteo our lead EU affairs manager, will kind of will give you an overview of that. We have Annie Adams with us as well, an independent consultant who's been working with FSC and many other clients across the last year or so, getting businesses ready for EUDR. So she's going to kind of give us an overview of how the business world in particular, is responding to EUDR. And then we'll move into our own responses within FSC, the response to EUDR from the normative framework side. Yannicka will be presenting that, point 4 here. And then FSC's response to the EUDR from kind of the more digital infrastructure technology side, and that's point 5, and Steve will be leading on that, before Michal will then finish up the presentation slots with just kind of giving you a sense of what's ahead in 2024 in the in the FSC EUDR world, and to help you plan as we move forward into 2024. Okay. With that, I'll hand over to Matteo. Thanks, Matteo, for for taking this on, and over to you.
Thank you, Rand. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Matteo Mascolo. I lead the EU affairs at the Forest Stewardship Council. I will be speaking for around 15 minutes today, and I will be covering in my presentation essentially 3 points. The first point, I will briefly describe the Forest Stewardship Council, what is FSC. I will then move on in sketching out the EUDR. The majority of you already know what EUDR is. I will just re-emphasize the main points, and then I will be sharing with you all the latest news that have been shared with us as a member of the EU Commission EUDR multi-stakeholder platform. And let me start with the very first point. So this is an FSC webinar, so you all know already FSC, but for those who don't know, FSC is a sustainable forestry solution, and our mission is to ensure healthy and resilient forests for all, forever. We are a global system. We have been operating for around 29 years, and throughout these years, we also have developed specific expertise with regard to due diligence legislation, and in particular, the role of schemes in it. I'm referring in particular on the EU timber regulation, which is the predecessor of the EUDR. We have around 150 million hectares of certified forest and more than 1,200 members, which are paramount to achieve FSC mission. With regard to our members, they are divided in 3 chambers. We have the social chamber, the environmental chamber, and the economic chamber. And our members together, they co-create the most robust standards for sustainable forest management, which are developed globally and then adapted locally. And this leads me already to the second point of my presentation. What is the EUDR? So the EUDR, first of all, is a new law. It's the EU regulation on deforestation-free products. The main goal, this is a landmark law, and the main goal is to minimize the EU contribution to deforestation and degradation. The sub-goal, the idea of the European Union, is to incentivize the creation of a deforestation-free and legal markets for certain commodities which are associated with deforestation. We will see in the next slide which are those commodities. And from this slide, I would like to emphasize 4 points. The first point is that this is indeed an European law, but it's set to have a global impact, as also this webinar demonstrates, given the participation from stakeholders from all over the world. The second point is that this is a landmark law because this law is the first law in the world that tackles not only deforestation, but also degradation. And the fact that degradation is included has also then concrete implication, particularly with regard the commodities that are included, that fall into the scope of the EUDR. And the third point, and it's important to clarify that, is that the European Union with this law, the European Union cannot impose directly obligation on partner countries. So the European Union cannot impose obligation on Brazil, on Thailand, on Vietnam. Rather, what the European Union does is to use its own market as a leverage. So if you are a company and if you want to place in the EU market or export from the EU market certain commodities, and we will see which are these commodities, you need to respect certain obligations. Those are called the due diligence obligation, and is about minimizing as much as possible the risk of illegality or deforestation. The fourth and final point stemming from this slide is that if you read the objectives of the EUDR, so fighting deforestation, fighting degradation, and ensuring and creating a deforestation-free and legal market, well, those are objectives that are very much in line with the Forest Stewardship Council. In fact, the European Union goal with the EUDR and the FSC mission are actually mutually reinforcing. The EUDR is a priority for FSC and we're doing our best in order to support the EUDR implementation and to make the EUDR a reality on the ground. My colleagues will further explain this point. Now, once again, the majority of you are already familiar with EUDR and how it works. So just a little recap, just a very quick recap on the main elements of the EUDR. The EUDR covers several commodities. Those are palm oil, soy, cattle, cocoa, coffee, and rubber. Those are the commodities that are mainly commonly associated with deforestation. And then there is also wood. And wood is in there because wood is not a driver of deforestation, but is a driver of degradation. So because the European Commission has included wood among the commodities, deforestation, then wood is included among the commodities in the scope of this regulation. So if you are a company and you want to place these commodities in the EU market, you need to make sure that you source this commodity from areas that were not subject to deforestation, and you need to make sure that these commodities are legal according to the law of the country of origin. So the novelty of this regulation is that it tackles both legality and sustainability. I would also like to mention that these requirements apply for all the commodities. Wood as an additional requirement. So wood has to be legal, deforestation free, and does also need to be degradation free. So in terms of applicability, this regulation applies in case you want to import these commodities, in case you want to export this commodity, and also if you want to place the commodity in the internal European trade. So the applicability is quite broad. In terms of the structure, the main structure is due diligence. So if you want to place this commodity, you need to undertake a couple of steps in order to reduce as much as possible the risk of illegality and deforestation. We will see more in detail the due diligence in the next slides. The novelty here is that these due diligence obligations are connected to a benchmarking system. This means that the European Commission will classify countries according to the level of risk, and depending on the level of risk, the due diligence obligation will vary. Now, geolocation. Geolocation is the essence, is the bulk of this regulation. So companies will always need to share the geolocation coordinates of the relevant products up until each plot of land. And the idea is that you cannot claim that a product is deforestation free if you don't know where it comes from. With regard to the role of certification schemes, they are effective tools that can support companies in meeting the EUDR due diligence obligation. However, being certified doesn't automatically means compliance with EUDR. This is because every actor must play an important part, an important role in the fight against deforestation and degradation. At the same time, the European Commission has made it clear that it is important to employ, to use schemes that are robust, that are credible, and in particular schemes that are aligned as much as possible with EUDR requirements. That's precisely what FSC is doing, and this will be further explained by my colleagues later on. So, back to our engagement in the EUDR multi-stakeholder platform. We have been engaging on the EUDR since day one, since the beginning. We have been engaging on this topic even before the EUDR was tabled. We are an official member of the EU Commission EUDR multi-stakeholder platform since 2020. And actually in this capacity, we have contacted the European Commission, and the European Commission is very pleased that we are sharing the latest news with you all. The first news that we can share is that there are now new members in EUDR multi-stakeholder platform. So congratulations to all the new members. We look forward to working with you all. We have been working already in the past with companies, with NGOs, with indigenous communities, and we really look forward to working with you all. The other news, recent news, is that within the European Commission EUDR multi-stakeholder platform, the Commission has also created 2 working groups, one on traceability and the other one on smallholders. The idea of this working group, the goal of these working groups is about gathering feedback to share best practices on how to enhance traceability, to enable, traceability, and how to enhance the capacity of smallholders. FSC is a proud member of both the traceability and smallholders working group. Another very important news is that the Commission actually, since after having tabled the EUDR, has also shared a set of frequently asked questions, a set of FAQ. These FAQ have now been revised and they've now been divided in thematic clusters. This is actually a live document, so this is a document that the Commission uploads frequently. So we encourage you to check the official website of the European Commission. And what I'm going to share from now on are new FAQ that have been added or specified. So we're going to share with you the latest news that we have also received as a member of the EU Commission EUDR multi-stakeholder platform. So the first news, which is actually not really a news, but is worth specifying, is the concept of negligible risk. So for those who have already worked in the context of the EUDR, you may already be familiar with this concept, but for the others, it's worth repeating a little bit what is due diligence. So due diligence is a series of steps that companies have to undertake in order to reduce as much as possible the risk of illegality and deforestation. You will see these 3 steps in the slide, and when you carry out these steps properly, you may conclude that there is negligible risk that the product it was sourced from illegal sources or from a land that was subject to deforestation. Negligible risk essentially means that there are no major concerns of illegality or deforestation. What is important to point out here that you may conclude on the negligible risk, but it must be the result of the due diligence obligation. So the fact that a product, the risk is negligible, is actually a precondition to place the product in the EU or to export the product from the EU market. Certification schemes can support in reaching the conclusion that the risk is negligible, particularly at the risk assessment and risk mitigation phase. But once again, schemes can support companies in meeting the EUDR due diligence obligation, but can never automatically, can never exempt companies to carry out this due diligence obligation. We have already stated that the novelty of this regulation is that the due diligence obligation are connected with the country benchmarking. This means that the Commission will benchmark countries according to the level of risk. There will be 3 levels of risk: low level of risk, standard risk, and high level of risk. And the due diligence obligation will vary according to the level of risk. So for example, if the Commission classify a country as a low level of risk, then the company sourcing the commodity from that country will have less obligation. So should not carry out all due diligence obligation, but can stop at the information gathering step of the due diligence, which is the very first step. What is important to remember, and what we would like to share with you all, is that the Commission still has to benchmark the countries. This has to be done by when the EUDR will become applicable, so in 1 year time. The Commission is currently hiring a subcontractor, which is going to help the Commission in this exercise. Actually, the deadline to identify, to hire the subcontractor expires today. What is also important to remember is that the Commission, together with the subcontractor, will benchmark countries, but also part of countries. Once again, the due diligence obligation will vary according to the level of risk. The default risk for all countries will be standard, and in case the Commission will classify a country as a high level of risk, then it will also set up a dialogue with that particular country in order to lower the level of risk. So we spoke about due diligence. We spoke on how the due diligence is connected with the benchmarking system. It is also important to remember that all the information that companies are acquiring via the due diligence process will need to be included in a due diligence statement, which will then be uploaded in the EU information system. The EU information system is an IT tool that is currently being developed by the European Commission, and the European Commission is currently running a pilot phase. This pilot phase started on the 18th of December. It will run by the end of this month. There are currently 100 participants. Those are mainly companies that are participating in this pilot phase. And the main goal, the main objective, is to gather feedback, live feedback on how this EU information system is working or not working. So the idea is not really to ask for new functionalities, but really to share concrete feedback if this EU information system is working or not. The assessment of this exercise will be shared with the members of the EU Commission EUDR multi-stakeholder platform. So FSC will be notified. We will be sharing this information with you all as we're planning more and more communication activities throughout this year. The EU Forest Observatory is also a new initiative from the European Commission. This is a new service that was recently officially launched by the European Commission. The idea is that this service will support the EUDR implementation, particularly with the sharing of reference maps about forest degradation and forest deforestation rates, not only in Europe, but globally as well. And what is important to remember here is that these reference maps that will be produced by the EU Forest Observatory are non-mandatory, non-exclusive, and non-legally binding. What does it mean? It means that there is no obligation to actually use, to actually employ the maps, the reference maps that will be produced by the EU Forest Observatory. The obligation is due diligence. The obligation is to assess and mitigate the risk of illegality and deforestation, but there is no obligation to use these maps. The second point, non-exclusive, means that it is possible for operators and traders to use the maps of the EU Forest Observatory, but it's also possible to nonetheless use other maps. So if you're a company, if you're developing a specific technology, if you're using maps developed by other organizations, you are free to do so. The most important point is the third point, though, non-legally binding. So even if you use reference maps, either those produced by the EU Forest Observatory, or if you use reference maps that are produced by other organizations, this will never lead towards automatic compliance. So using maps is just one way to carry out the due diligence obligation. So just one way to assess the risk of illegality and deforestation. So far, we have been speaking about demand-side measures, but what is also important are supply-side measures. So supply-side measures are about engaging with partner countries in order to address the root cause of deforestation. And this is why the European Commission has recently launched the Team Europe initiative. So this is about initiatives to step up the engagement and the partnerships with partner countries. And this is called Team Europe because it's the European Union together with the EU member states. The most important pillar of the Team Europe initiative is the Zero Deforestation Hub. And this is an hub which is about sharing information, knowledge, and outreach on specific aspects of the EUDR with the idea of achieving deforestation-free value chains, not only in Europe, but also globally. And the most important project so far of the Zero Deforestation Hub is the SAFE program. This is a program that is focusing on the global south, and is about empowering smallholders and empowering them in their transition towards deforestation-free value chains, with the final goal of making sure that no one is left behind. There are already activities ongoing in Brazil, Ecuador, Indonesia, and Zambia, but the idea of the project is also to scale up these activities in other countries, for instance, Vietnam. There is also the forthcoming technical facility on deforestation-free value chains, and this is about on-demand support on technical topics. So it's about giving ad hoc support on technical issues, for example, on traceability, on geolocation, about reference maps, particularly with the idea of empowering, even in this case, smallholders. Just to remember that Team Europe initiative is an initiative to engage more with partner countries. This initiative is going to focus on agricultural value chain. There is also another initiative that focus on partnerships with partner countries. This is called Forest Partnership Initiatives, and focus more on forest and biodiversity conservation. And this leads me to my last slide, EUDR. So there is already a lot, but what can we expect? So first and foremost, let me remind to everybody that EUDR is already a reality. EUDR will become applicable at the end of this year, particularly for big companies. There are some exemptions for small and medium enterprises. I'm not going to repeat what is written in all these slides. I'm just going to summarize the most important point. So first of all, the EU member states have to nominate the EU competent authorities, and this will be an important moment because the EU competent authorities are the actors that are going to enforce the EUDR. There will be some guidance documents that will be issued by the European Commission, particularly a guidance document on certification schemes, on legality. The Commission has to benchmark countries according to the level of risk. This will be done within 1 year from now. There might be the possibility to include other ecosystem, also other commodities, and there will be also a general review of the regulation. This is what we can expect from the EUDR, but also what can you expect from FSC? But definitely, once again, this is an organizational, a top priority for FSC, and you can expect commitment, energy, passions, but also solution. And my colleagues are going to speak precisely about that. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Matteo. Yeah, before we move on to Annie's section, just a quick, we're just monitoring some of the questions that are coming in. Some of them are more kind of aimed at the Commission. So we're trying to make a point where it's questions that we can't necessarily answer ourselves. Annie will probably give some signposting, at least, of where you can find some of the answers in her presentation soon. But so we're trying to take the more specific FSC EUDR questions there as well. It also helps if you, just a reminder, if you like, upvote questions as well, so we can get the priority ones answered as soon as that Q&A session opens towards the end of this session. Thanks again, and with that, I'll hand over to you, Annie.
Thanks, and Matteo. So to introduce myself, I'm Annie Adams. I'm an independent consultant. I've had the pleasure of working with FSC in one guise or another for 20 years or so, having started life as a social responsibility manager for Timber at B&Q, part of the Kingfisher Group, who is one of the FSC founders. So really coming from the retail end of things, working at the Tropical Forest Trust, now Earthworm, as a senior manager, supporting FSC certification in Southeast Asia, and as the lead for the UK government's central point of expertise on timber, and latterly as an independent. As we develop our own individual responses to a regulation, which, to be very clear, is designed to change what business as usual looks like, I strongly recommend that we all reflect on the responses across the sector that we've seen over the last 18 months. First to note that in summer 2023, I was asked to be a peer review as part of the consultancy team. We were commissioned by FSC to conduct a deep dive to identify differences between FSC and EUDR and recommend potential opportunities for gaining further alignment. This formed one element of the multi-pronged approach FSC has taken in responding to the EUDR, which we are now seeing coming to fruition with the consultation process kicking off later this month. So in talking about responses over the last 18 months, I've seen the expectations of the European Commission and the competent authority become much clearer. For all stakeholders, including not just the companies considered operators and traders, but also customers, suppliers, certification schemes, service providers, investors, NGOs, and wider society, their own expectations are becoming clearer, and the need of their own stakeholders that they need to fulfill. In particular, as many of you will be interested, what the competent authority wants to see is becoming much clearer. Explicit alignment when conducting enforcement checks is what's really coming across to me. So when a competent authority turns up to do an enforcement check, they will have a checklist effectively of the EUDR requirements, and they will need to assess the operator or trader that they are conducting a check against to understand how close you are to compliance with the EUDR. To ensure responses to this are feasible, and it is important to consider, first of all, the commercial viability of our response in terms of cost, staffing, and changes to internal processes. Market constraints, such as the complexity of composite material supply chains and the just-in-time approach to orders, as well as the availability of qualified staff. We must also note that different parts of the supply chain will respond differently to the regulation, from those that have never needed to comply before, perhaps because they're a trader and they just need to do record keeping under the EUDR, or perhaps they are trading in other forest risk commodities, not just wood. So all operators and traders that are placing on the market or making available on the market relevant products listed in Annex 1 of the EUDR, and I think we've provided a link in chat, will need to register due diligence statements to be able to continue to trade. So this is going to change the way that we all do business. We all, I'm sure, are aware that SMEs in particular are going to need substantial support to comply with the regulation. And whilst plans are underway, we must actively collaborate across our supply chain to make this work. Finally, to ensure feasibility, we must meet the industry-wide need to increase the supply of technically competent people, both to meet the short-term urgency of being compliant by the end of this year, and the longer-term need to continue to meet those requirements. So considering that balancing act that I've just been talking about, over the last 18 months, we have seen across the forest and timber sector a variety of responses. We should bear in mind that the EUDR is, of course, designed to challenge business as usual, as I've said, in prohibiting products involving deforestation. Some organisations have emerged as leaders in making what may feel almost undoable, doable. And I would include FSC and ICIL, of which FSC is a member, in this category, along with many other stakeholders. Looking at those challenges, some leaders are considering adaptations to their medium to long-term strategy. For example, investing in jurisdictional approaches in high-risk areas such as palm plantations in Indonesia, as well as taking a controlled wood approach to avoid deforestation. Importantly, a consistent approach across the sector will help to maintain access and can create a level playing field for all. From a more practical perspective, we are all looking over the fence at what others are doing as we map key interpretations. And the great news is that through the FAQs on the EC's website, you can now see what the EC is saying about some of those interpretations, and they are actively engaging with many trade associations and other stakeholders to map those, so you are able to submit your own questions to the EC and to be really effective through your trade association as well. If I may add, I see collaborative problem solving as the only way forward to make this doable, and I am really heartened to see so many stakeholders, including FSC, taking this approach. Service providers and certification schemes, including FSC and others, are looking at what technical solutions can be used to support some of the most challenging requirements, such as gathering, validating, and communicating geolocation, deforestation data, and other due diligence information. Through developing due diligence frameworks, deforestation data protocols, blockchain, geospatial data, and wood fibre origin testing, some are looking with a critical eye at the relevance and the technical validity and effectiveness of such tools. Through following what, for example, Preferred by Nature are doing on geolocation sharing, World Forest ID on origin testing, not to mention FSC's work, which we're going to be hearing more about shortly, we can support emerging solutions that are relevant and credible. We all have the opportunity through consultation processes, such as the ones that FSC will be running later this month, but there will be many more from other service providers and stakeholders as well, to provide important feedback to help make EUDR doable and support a consistent approach to interpretation of such tools across the sector, not just for companies, but also for competent authorities. We are now starting to see companies piloting their due diligence frameworks, including procedures, risk libraries, and supplier engagement, as well as securing technical staff to ensure that you can own your own compliance. So please don't pay too many consultants. Finally, to manage and implement the regulation well, organisations are considering practically and strategically the importance of planning for change. As we will see revisions to the regulation itself, those are planned, and Matteo has just talked about that, but also more importantly, that we need to be part of engaging with emerging practice as it evolves into recognised good practice. And that is an excellent place to hand over to Yannicka.
Thanks. Straight over to you. Nicely lined up there, Annie. Straight over to you, Yannicka.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Yannicka Murphy, and I am here to try and concisely relay what it is that we have been doing to update our normative framework and align with the EUDR. But first, what is it that I mean when I'm saying normative framework? Well, it's essentially a compilation of our standards, policies, and procedures that make up the certification system that you all know and love, and to which our certificate holders and certification bodies need to conform to. It's basically all of our requirements. Back to FSC requirements and how they differ from EUDR requirements. So, let's explore some of the solutions in the works that build up on our top of our existing normative framework. My colleagues at FSC have been working tirelessly and analyzed our existing normative framework requirements against EUDR, and we are happy to relay that as the most credible global sustainable forestry solution, we already deliver on a number of EUDR requirements, including many social requirements and legal compliance. Here with the green lines in this folder, you can see. With our existing requirements, you can see that you're almost there for EUDR compliance. Nonetheless, we've also identified some additions to our existing requirements, which would be needed on top in order to fully align with the EUDR. And these are the elements shown here. One of which I want to speak about now, is the FSC regulatory module. So what is this module? It is a single standard or voluntary add-on standard. Our goal was to create an easy-to-use, out-of-the-box modular, which means like in addition to offering, which can be turned on and off. This offering is completely voluntary. In this way, it doesn't disrupt our entire global certification system, but rather addresses the needs of those affected by the EUDR. So this is a single standard, which is called the FSC regulatory module. This module is in addition to existing certification requirements of forest management, controlled wood, and chain of custody, all in just one standard. It's also for users such as certification bodies, as it includes accreditation requirements. So I want to provide just a little teaser of what's being proposed in this FSC regulatory module and what these additional requirements will entail. This starting with forest management. So where did we find differences between FSC forest management certification and the EUDR? Well, the definition of deforestation isn't perfectly aligned. In EUDR, a due diligence system is required, whereas this is not a requirement of our FSC principles and criteria. What the word geolocation precisely means differs between our requirements and EUDR. We use the coordinates of the management unit, and EUDR uses plot of land. EUDR also asks for time of production when we currently don't. And some additional terms and definitions aren't really precisely aligned. So, what are we doing about this? Deforestation free is an important term both for EUDR but also us at FSC. As such, we wanted to specify how exactly we are creating a deforestation-free system, a change already anticipated through our policy to address conversion alignment, but now being fast-tracked. In the regulatory module, we're introducing requirements for a due diligence system for forest managers and aligning with the EUDR geolocation requirements. Other relevant definitions will also be adopted or adapted within this FSC regulatory module. Just as in forest management, there are also differences between our chain of custody system and EUDR. There are different terms, due diligence obligations, such as more information collection and risk assessment and risk mitigation requirements. But actually, risk mitigation is largely already provided through FSC forest management certification. Nonetheless, to close the remaining differences of our add-on requirements will include a due diligence system. We will show for which user types based on EUDR applies to what in the FSC system. Since, for example, in EUDR, they use terminology such as SMEs, which means small, medium enterprises, and operator, trader terminology. Product classifications aren't entirely the same between systems, and EUDR uses a harmonized system coding, so we are aligning that with our product specifications. Within this module, we're also introducing a regulatory claim, which will be a claim made on sales and delivery documents used in combination with the FSC claim, excluding FSC recycled, for products based on inputs exclusively of material which conforms with the FSC regulatory module. How to use this claim is included within the module, and we are developing an advice note to allow for passing that claim on for non-regulatory users. Last but not least, what about controlled wood? Well, actually, our controlled wood system is already risk-based and closely aligned with EUDR's predecessor, the EUTR. So additional requirements will not be needed for controlled wood users beyond what is already specified within the chain of custody additional requirements. Nonetheless, right now we use high risk and low risk terminology in the controlled wood framework, but EUDR uses negligible and non-negligible. So FSC will align that terminology so that it's not only clear, but really consistent throughout our entire system. Coming back to our earlier image, I wanted to briefly touch on this risk management framework. FSC risk assessments are key features within the FSC regulatory module and will be a great additional value. Our risk assessments will include EU benchmarking, but even go beyond, offering certificate holders an invaluable tool to manage their risk assessments. We're really excited about showcasing the future of our risk assessments soon. And why? Because we have already been revising the FSC risk assessment framework. These risk assessments are the next generation of FSC's existing risk assessments for controlled wood sourcing, but now they will be available for forest management, chain of custody, on top of controlled wood certification, and even for both certified and non-certified companies, and cover all EUDR requirements. This provides one single standardized risk assessment for each country. We're confident that these risk assessments will be a super great tool for companies to efficiently assess and mitigate risks. I won't get into these cool technology tools related to the risk assessments because that is the next part of this presentation. But want to learn more about these exciting certification updates related to the normative framework? Stay tuned, because in just 2 weeks, we're launching a public consultation on everything I just discussed for 30 days. The consultation begins on the 1st of February and runs through March 1st. Also, please further mark your calendars for more webinars dedicated specifically to these normative requirements. Looking forward to seeing you online there. Thank you.
Thank you, Yannicka. And with that, we'll move straight on to Steve. We're running a little bit short of shorter on time than we did this morning, so let's just crack on. Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Anand. Thanks, Yannicka. So, yes, let me talk you through the technology tools that we have in our plans to deliver for you to help you rise to meet this considerable challenge that is to be posed by EUDR. And at the heart of this slide, you'll see is something called FSC blockchain. This is just entering trials at the moment. And this, I think, is the single piece of technology that could do the most to change FSC. Why? Because it, for the first time, will add a proper element of traceability onto our existing certification system. And by traceability, what I mean is being able to track the product from one legal owner, one certificate holder, to the next. There are other traceability products that actually track physical location. You could combine the two if you wanted, but what we are focused on here is tracking those transfers in legal ownership. And I think this will really quite transform what we can do with FSC certification and what information you can get out of it. Because whereas at the moment you simply rely on the fact that your suppliers are FSC certified, you don't know actually where the products have come from unless you have made separate and additional efforts to find that out. And those efforts may go out of date, or you may have to invest a lot of time to keep that information up to date. So within FSC blockchain, we will be able to capture all of that for you. And just by way of example, we know that some of our certificate holders, in meeting the obligations of the current EUDR, that is the timber regulation rather than deforestation regulation, they have been employing teams of people essentially just to shuffle electronic documents about and keep records, petabytes of data stored away for as and when EU competent authorities may come and ask them to explain the sourcing of their products. This is a huge cost burden on these companies. We think we can address that under EUDR and under EUDR. A lot of those problems will be reduced substantially if you can use a tool like FSC blockchain, because you simply import the information provided by your suppliers and then you don't have to go out and find it yourself. So FSC blockchain is really the center of the tool set we will be offering to you. Underneath that, feeding in, we've got a couple of new tools which will be important. The Forest Atlas, FSC Forest Atlas, coming very soon, where you can upload your forest boundaries. Digital audit reports we already have for our forest management certificates. We will add a component of those for the controlled wood. And we will also be introducing a new risk assessment library that will show the risks that apply to different parts of the world on top of a map of the world. Bringing all of this together and giving the key outputs that you will need in order to comply with, or show your compliance with EUDR, is a due diligence reporting system. So that will use the supply chain data that is sitting in FSC blockchain to then pull out from our digital audit reports all those risk assessment data and the mitigating actions being taken by your ultimate suppliers in the forest. And so then all of that is just simply there for you at the click of a button, rather than you having to go chase all that data manually, which is a huge amount of work. So let's talk through these tools in a little bit more detail. Firstly, geolocation data is a point of concern that many people first spot and get alarmed about when they come into contact with EUDR, because hitherto we have not been required to provide that sort of data to regulatory authorities. However, in my view, this challenge in some ways is actually not a big deal, because the world solved how to collect geolocation data about 20 years ago. If you carry around a smartphone, then you can walk around a plot of land. If you've got the right app, you've got yourself Polygon. It's pretty easy. Under a heavy canopy, you may need a more industrial strength GPS, but we know how to do this. The challenge instead is to manage all of that data at the level of granularity required for EUDR and then to transmit it. But collecting the data is not a big deal. What we will do is we want to make that existing tools available to collect that data and to bring that data into our systems as easy as possible. But the collecting of the data would be the responsibility of the forest manager. Next, onto FSC blockchain. What will it do? As I said earlier, it will track transfers in ownership. How will we do that? We will require that both the buyer and the seller enter into FSC blockchain data of their transactions. If both the buyer and seller's data match, then we'll say, okay, this would appear to be a valid transaction. Therefore, we will write it into the blockchain. If the two don't agree, then it will not get written, and you would have to contact each other to check who had made an error, correct the error, and then it can get written into the blockchain. The blockchain itself is a piece of technology. You may have heard of them being in relation to cryptocurrencies. Our blockchain will use much, much less energy than cryptocurrencies, so we won't have a problem there. But it is really great for these purposes because it is somewhat immune to the problems of tampering. The way the database is constructed, it makes it almost impossible to edit after the event a transaction you have stored on it. What will we be doing with this data? Well, it will all be encrypted right at the start, and then we will provide mechanisms to decrypt the data when needed. I'll come on to that later. We will also provide data and analytics and reporting for you so you can get instant value from that. So coming up next now, we have a short demo of part of the FSC blockchain system.
Hi, and welcome to this short video where I show you how you record and match a trade inside the FSC blockchain. Prior to this video, during the configuration of your setup, you will have defined who you have as trading partners, and you will have defined your products. The first thing to record a trade, in my case, I want to record a purchase that I did. I click record a trade. And as you can see, I can do 3 different things here. I can record a sales, I can record a purchase, or I can record a processing run, which is a manufacturing of the purchase, manufacturing it somehow and creating it into a different product that you can then sell. I want to record a purchase. In this case, I can either do it as a bulk upload, where I upload multiple products at the same time via an Excel spreadsheet. To show you this for demonstration purposes, I am going to select a single upload. This is not how we envision that most people will be using the FSC blockchain, but it is the easiest to understand how it works through, so that's what I'm showing you. I click single upload. First, I select a trading partner. Who am I buying from? I am buying from Liam's Forest. Then I insert the sales document ID. This would typically be your invoice number. Then I have to identify when was this invoice given to me. So I click here. In this case, the invoice was dated a little over a week ago on January 9th. So I select January 9th and I click OK. Then I have to specify what is on this invoice. Which product are we talking about? I click product, and there you can see I have a couple of predefined products already. I bought logs from Liam. And when I choose logs, the system automatically shows me what was predefined in my setup. So we know that it is FSC category W1, we know the HS code, and we know the species. If I had multiple species, I would be able to select the one that was relevant for this particular purchase. Now all I have to do is I have to select the claim type. Which type of FSC am I buying? In my case, I am buying 100% FSC. If I was buying FSC mix, I would be able to insert.
Oh, looks like we have a issue there.
Insert over here the percentages of FSC. And then the last thing I have to do is I have to fill in how much of the product have I bought. I have bought 10 logs. And as you can see, that automatically calculates the volume over here on the side. I could now upload additional documents if I needed to. This could be a map of geolocation. It could be harvesting permits. It could be different things I wanted to attach to this one purchase that I made. I click submit. And there we go. That is how you upload one single transaction. If I then go back to my dashboard, you will see that my transaction is now here as an unmatched transaction. What happens now is that that goes to Liam's instance on his blockchain, confirms with the information that he has then inputted, and then that becomes a matched transaction if he has inputted the same information as I have. I hope this gave a brief insight into how the FSC blockchain works. We will be creating a lot of support materials that will show every step of the way of how you utilize the FSC blockchain once you are ready to onboard.
Great. Okay. I hope that was useful to all of you there. Our fabulous colleague Loa there on the narration of that video. So going into a little bit more detail now about data confidentiality on blockchain. We know this is an absolutely critical issue. The data we are asking you to put into FSC blockchain, and by the way, use of FSC blockchain is completely voluntary. So if you don't like the idea of doing this, you do not have to do it. It is a tool for you if you so wish to help you meet EUDR requirements. If you do choose to put that data in, then we know it's highly sensitive, commercially sensitive. So we will encrypt it immediately at the point it is loaded into the database and encrypted so that even we can't read it. Then, of course, there's no point putting data in if you can never read it out again. So there will be rules to support decryption. Who can decide when it is decrypted? It's the person or company who uploaded it. We can call them the data owner. So they can approve individual requests from their customers to decrypt that data for their use, say, in meeting a due diligence requirement. But if you did that manually for each and every request, you might find that in itself would be a lot of work. So we will allow you to set up a rules-based system like you might have in your email client to sort out which requests you respond to positively and which you refuse. And there's a whole different basis set out on this slide to allow you to choose when, for how long, who gets to see it, what data exactly is shared, and how it is shared, so that you can be in control of all of that whilst not being required to click yes or no on too many of these things yourself. Moving on, risk assessment So we heard earlier from Yannicka that we are coming up with a new risk assessment framework. And I mentioned that we want to be able to show that spatially on a map. And so we'll be producing a new risk assessment library that will allow anybody, it doesn't have to be an FSC certificate holder, to come in and see what those risks are and see them graphically on a map and to explore what might be the consequences for your business. Secondly, the digital audit reports. These digital audit reports that we already have for the forest management certificates and working quite well, collecting for FSC a lot of data that we have not had before. We will add to them a new sheet that will explicitly contain the questions necessary to respond to the risk assessment, so we can capture all of that data in one place and then transmit it down the supply chain. And we will do the same thing, introduce the same tool for use in the sourcing of controlled wood, because that's, of course, a different place where forest products enter the FSC supply chain. Bringing all of these tools together is that due diligence reporting system. It sits on top of FSC blockchain. So if you or your suppliers are not using FSC blockchain, then unfortunately you won't be able to get much out of the due diligence reporting system. But if you are, then it can be very powerful, because it can pull together all the harvesting plots, not just from your certificate if you're a forest manager, but if you're in that chain of custody, from your suppliers that have contributed to a particular consignment of products that you have you are in the process of producing or selling. And so you can pull all of that data together across the different suppliers coming into the work you're doing and get a risk assessment that cuts across all of those different components of your product. The due diligence system will consider various types of risk, risk of origin and risks of mixing, the different sources of risk, the risk from your suppliers and the risk from your own operations, and consider the different levels of these risks and where the risks have been defined, whether in a public risk assessment or something conducted by you yourselves. And we'll pull all of this together into one place. And then with all of that happening, essentially, we have got built in here a know your supplier system. This is a concept that is very important in many modern supply chains, and between FSC blockchain and our due diligence reporting system, we expect to be able to provide that facility to you. So then at the end of that, we will be able to generate draft due diligence statements and annual reports appropriate for the EUDR. I say draft because at the end of the day, your companies are the ones that need to decide what you want to submit to the competent authorities. So you need the authority, the ability to edit anything that is included in that. But our system will provide all of that in one place for you at a click of a button. Of course, that relies upon you and your suppliers all being inside the FSC blockchain system. But if they are, then we think this could be an incredibly powerful tool for you to use. One last thing I want to mention before I hand over to Mikhail to end up here. All of these tools, the basic functionality will be free. And as I said earlier, their use is entirely optional. So it's your choice whether they can be of assistance to you. If you think not, then you are free to find alternative solutions. With that, over to Mikhail.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone. My name is Michał Knafleski, and I have the pleasure to lead EU project within FSC. Right now, I will be wrapping the presentation part up, and as a beginning, I would like to emphasize that over the past few months, we have been working very hard to assess the gaps between EUDR and FSC standards and normative framework, and we are trying to find the best solution to bridge these gaps and to become an enabler for you to meet the EUDR requirements. We are all facing, as you could hear, and probably you also already experience, a lot of uncertainty, and this is something that we deal with on a regular basis. Also, the complexity of the topic, legal aspects, information sharing aspects, technological aspects, make it also not easier to actually come up with the best solutions. In the same time, we are all aware of the upcoming deadlines. All the companies need to comply with EUDR by the end of this year, and this is where the biggest challenge is in terms of making changes to normative framework and delivery of the technology. So what's still ahead of us? As we stated before, we spent last year to develop the solutions, to analyze the gaps and to find the proper solutions, which we believe we have successfully done so. But right now in the February, we are inviting you all to take part in our public consultation of all the changes that are designed for the EUDR. This means regulatory module. This means normative framework adaptations and modifications, as well as risk assessment framework. After the consultation process, we will incorporate the feedback and we will analyze it throughout fully, and then we will go through our internal process to get the final standards and final documents approved. We are at the same time starting the trials with the selected companies who will undergo a set of activities for us to make sure that the solutions that we worked on, both on technological as well as on normative framework side, actually meet their expectations and can be adapted and help and to enable organizations to meet the EUDR requirements. On the same time, we are trying to also support you with the ongoing communication to the market. We are using multi-channel communication to provide information around EUDR, around the solutions that we are right now working on, and we are trying to keep this communication phased out, so not to overwhelm everyone with all the information, as we know there is a lot of information noise out there. But we also want to keep the communication as a dialogue. So we are not only inviting you to provide us feedback during the consultation process, but we are also next month, from the early February, we will be also launching an additional survey to assess what are the main needs, expectations, obstacles that companies are currently facing, and we are encouraging you to follow our pages and participate in the survey, which is another way to inform us and to let us know where you stand and what are the main challenges for you. Last but not least, of course, as mentioned by Steve before, we are developing blockchain platform as also other platforms to in final there is a complex set of tools that can be used to enable and to meet the EUDR requirements. We are aiming to have these tools ready somewhere in mid of the year, so you can start implementing these solutions in Q3 of 2024 till the end of the year, so you have sufficient time to make the changes and develop your own processes. But it's the slides and the goal and the implementation of the tools. It's not. We don't have, unfortunately, magic wand that would make everyone 100% compliant with EUDR requirements from the moment you start using the tools. There is also a lot of work that you need to do yourself. One thing that was already probably mentioned by Annie is you need to get familiar with the EUDR requirement. This is the mandatory law, and all the operators, all the companies that want to bring the products to the European market, they will need to comply with the EUDR, and they will be always responsible for the EUDR. In order to meet these requirements, first step is to actually make sure you have the right legal basis to exchange information with your vendors. So you need to make sure that you have signed right non-disclosure agreements and other contracts to make sure you can pass the relevant data through and you can get the important data from your vendors, from your suppliers. The other thing that you can already be doing is you can start establishing these processes to get the data. We are right now developing the tools to help you manage the data and share it across the supply chain. But the first point is to actually have this data available and to be able to put into our system. So establishing these and establishing processes that will help you to exchange the information, to make the to open the communication channels with your suppliers and try to mobilize your supply chain is the second thing that you can already be doing. The third thing is, of course, you will have to also have procedures to show that, which show that, for example, if you are if you are trading the wood for European market and some other markets, the requirements may be a little bit different. So you also need to find yourself. You need to develop your internal procedures that will allow you to segregate these two sources. These sources. So to wrap up, we are working on the solution, and while working on the final solution, there are three main rules that we that are very important. Three principles that are very important for us. First of all, it's very important that we have a set of tools and solutions that are flexible. What does it mean? It means that you can switch the voluntary module on and off whenever you need it. But we are also investigating ways to make the data exchange as effortless as it can be through, for example, we already showed you that you will be able to use manual input, you will be able to use templates to upload the data, but we are also developing the API solution to so you can have them connected to your internal systems and make the information exchange automatic. In the same time, we are aiming to cover as much of EUDR requirements as we can. So we want to make the solution totally comprehensive through delivering solutions around exchanging the information around the geolocation traceability and solutions that will allow you to prepare your due diligence system and therefore due diligence statements there. Of course, as these platforms will be integrated within FSC, they will allow you to match the data together and to exchange it throughout the various tools that we provide. So you will need to only type in the information once. This will make the solutions cost effective, especially as Steve already mentioned, that all the basic functionalities needed to meet EUDR requirements will be free for you to use, and you will be able to, and you will already get a lot of additional value from ready-to-use frameworks and in the future country risk assessment, which can be a basis for your due diligence system that you are developing. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention. We are right now finishing the presentation part. Right now in the chat, you may find the poll, the very quick survey. So please spend 1-2 minutes after this webinar to give us heads up and provide us with the feedbacks on how you enjoyed this webinar. And I'm passing over to you, Anna.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, before you disappear, please do fill out that poll. That really helps us to shape our these type of engagements moving forward. And this is also a call for our IT team who's running the meeting. Just please stop the meeting, the recording, sorry, not the meeting, but the recording. And we will move into the Q&A for now. Okay, so I have